Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you happen to be. As you all know, my name is Carmen Mazzara. I serve as Executive Director of the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, or APSIA. In addition to our work with the leading graduate schools of international affairs around the world, we are always so happy to be the home of the Public and International Service Advisor Network. We're delighted to bring you yet another installment of our PISA webinar series, this time talking about the U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program, which I've had the great privilege to meet the students and to get to know them a little bit, and they are fantastic, and it's a tremendous opportunity. So I'm so glad to have Marty Estelle here to talk to you about the program, its details, and the opportunity that it provides for your students. We are recording, so this session will be available on the APSIA YouTube page afterwards later today. If you have any technical issues, please feel free to reach out to me or to my amazing colleague, Brittany Chor, who makes these webinars possible. Thank you, Brittany. And then I also invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat to one another and to get those great questions ready for Marty so that you can understand and bring this opportunity to your students. And Marty, you're already getting applause without even starting. So that's a great way to begin. And I'm delighted to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Maybe I should quit while I'm ahead. I really appreciate this this opportunity to speak with all of you, and you all taking the time to learn a little bit more about the US FSIP. I am a retired Foreign Service officer, but I have been brought back on a contract to work with student programs, specifically on this program. All of the State Department student programs are fabulous, wonderful opportunities for your students. They're now all paid, which I think is another fabulous, improvement on the overall. But US FSIP is special. And part of what I wanted to talk about today is to help you understand why. And basically, it's the only thing they could have dragged me back from retirement to do, because I'm that passionate about working with the students on this particular program. It is a 2-year commitment. Students apply as rising sophomores and rising juniors, and they participate as rising juniors and rising seniors. So it is not the only undergraduate program at the Department of State, but it is strictly undergraduate, unlike the other seasonal semester internship program. And it is specifically designed for both need-based and merit-based applications. The whole idea behind this is to get students who don't see themselves as being eligible for an opportunity at the Department of State, or don't see themselves as being a possible diplomat or civil service employee with the Department of State. And what we're hoping after 2 years with us is that they will realize that they have every reason to be in the room. They have a perspective that is very important to foreign policy and diplomacy in the United States. And for me, that's really the fun part. When they come in and they're not really sure of themselves or why they're there, or they may be a bit hesitant, and then by the time they leave 2 years with us, they're just empowered. And for me, that's the really fun part. One of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is, and I will say this right up front, our application timing is horrible. We do the application at the end of August, when many of your students are just getting back on campus. So one of the reasons why I like to talk to you all now is this is the time to start putting, the bug in the ear, to get the information out that they should be thinking about this opportunity over the summer and be prepared when it goes live on USA Jobs at the end of August. We do it at this time because a security clearance is required. And we have been playing back and forth on the timing in order to give maximum amount of time for students to get their security clearances. This is oftentimes a very complicated group of students, and they have very interesting complicated lives, and sometimes their security clearances take a little bit longer to get through. And so we like to give that maximum amount of time in order to get the security clearances through. So the students, like I said, they apply as rising sophomores or rising juniors, though of course by August they may have already started that sophomore year or that junior year, depends on what kind of a school system you're representing. They need to have a 3.2 GPA. They can be studying anything. They don't have to be doing international affairs. One of the things that I like to stress when I have an opportunity to speak to advisors is that the Department of State and Diplomacy needs all skill sets. We need people who understand economics, climate change, zoology, everything, absolutely everything is global, and the State Department is involved in every aspect. So I encourage you to encourage a wide range of students to not select themselves out based on whatever they're studying. The application process opens, like I said, in August. It is a needs-based program. I can't give you a number to say if they make more than this, they don't qualify. We do ask them if they would like to include their FAFSA estimated family contribution sheet. That gives us an idea. And I will tell you that if you're talking about a student that has a family contribution of maybe $50,000 a year, that's probably not what we're looking for. But we don't really have a cutoff. Part of the application process includes an essay to explain what their financial situation is, because we all know that the FAFSA does not give the complete story of a student's financial needs or issues. So there is a written financial statement. There is also a statement of purpose, which we read very carefully. We are looking for students that are interested in public service. They don't have to know that they want to be diplomats, but we would like them to express an interest in international affairs and what's going on outside of the United States. But they don't have to have an experience in that. They don't have to have already had a study abroad experience. Most demonstrate some sort of multicultural experience. Well, you can get that in the United States. You don't have to go overseas for that. But mostly it's expressing an interest in learning more about diplomacy and global affairs and what the State Department does. So the application opens in August, and those are kind of the requirements that we were looking for. I think what might be most useful, the one thing I do like to stress, last year we got 1,600 applications. My problem is not getting enough applicants for this program. My problem or my challenge is getting it focused on the students that we're looking for. So that we can find those need-based, merit-based students who may not be seeing themselves as potential diplomats or potential professionals in a global environment. So what I'm asking for your assistance, because you're the ones who know who these students are, who may be hiding out someplace, to encourage them to apply for this program. I think what might be most useful, Carmen, is to work from questions that the advisors have. And I'd be glad to answer any questions anybody would like to put forward.
Thanks, Marty. That's a welcome invitation to all of you to raise your hands or type questions in the chat, and we can go from there. Marty, while our colleagues are typing, I'm curious, could you talk a little bit about what the students do in the program once they get in?
Of course. The first summer is dedicated to a domestic internship, along with 3 weeks of professional development. So we do a course at the Foreign Service Institute about writing for the department. We do a course with our historians about the history of foreign policy from the State Department's point of view. We introduce them to all the alphabet soup of professional development opportunities, whether it's fellowships for graduate school or Fulbright or a Boren or any of the language scholarships. So it's an opportunity for them to not only learn about the department, but also learn about ways that they can develop the skills that make them competitive. The reality is that the Department of State does not hire a lot of students directly off of an undergraduate campus. Most of our applicants, most of our successful applicants come from some other pathway. So this is an opportunity for the students to develop the skills to make themselves competitive, to learn about what those opportunities are, and to start focusing on how to do that. So the first summer is in Washington with one of the bureaus at the Department of State with this professional development component. And then the second summer, the students come on board as federal employees, GS4 paid program. We take care of the housing, we take care of the transportation. And then we put them on leave without pay for the time in between the semesters, between the summers, in which we insist that they take the Foreign Service Officer test as practice. And then for that second summer, they go to an embassy overseas. We have a bidding process where we give them a list of potential positions available, and then they have to tell us why they should go where, and we do very similar to what's done for entry-level officers in the Foreign Service, and we assign them overseas. So after this experience of 2 years, because a lot of times, we all have to justify what we do for a living. We consider the return on investment to be about 25% of the students who participate, and we now have an alumni base of about 240 students, have come back to the department in some capacity. They have come back as civil service, foreign service officers, foreign service specialists. A lot of them start out as contractors, and then come on through other ways. So I do think it's a very effective program. They may not know that they want to work for us when they come on board, but we snag them over the 2 years. And even if they don't come to the U.S. Department of State, they're going to be better global citizens, and I'm fine with that.
I can say from having been in those sessions, Marty does a wonderful, encouraging pitch to get them to come to state. Thanks to everybody for your questions in the chat and those sent directly to me. Marty, I have a couple here hoping for clarification about what year students should be in order to apply. Should they be current sophomores, current juniors? Can they be recent graduates? Typically, where should they be in their academic journey when they apply to the program?
They should apply to the program either at the very beginning of their sophomore or junior year, or they're going to be sophomore and juniors. Like I said, since the application comes at the very end of August, some schools on the quarter system may not have started yet. So the idea is that you apply as a sophomore or a junior. You have to be able to complete you have to be able to complete the full 2 years of the program. So you can't be like, I'm applying as a junior and I'm going to graduate in December of the next year. You have to be able to you have to be a continuing student. And when we do the application, we're very clear as to one of the questions is you cannot graduate after this date, which is usually spring 2 years from now. So that it's very clear that they have to finish out, they have to be continuing students and finish out. They do have to be undergraduates. They cannot have completed their undergraduate program.
That's great, thank you. And always that graduate by date, I think, is one of the most helpful things for students to understand where they fall within the consideration. The next basket of questions that I have is about those types of experiences, both that might be required for program consideration, might be ideal for program consideration, and then might be disqualifying for program consideration. Could you talk a little bit about those three buckets of experiences?
There are no experiences that are absolutely required. We're not going to say, oh, you didn't do this, so you're not competitive. Most of the students have some sort of interest in international affairs, and they explain in their essay where that interest comes from. So we do read the essays, not only from a content, but from a writing perspective. So I do encourage students to take a little bit of time to write it well. You don't have to have a study abroad experience, but you need to be able to articulate why you're motivated to pursue this opportunity. The other aspect of it is they get to choose from a list of what potential domestic internship they'd like, what office they'd like to serve in. So many students use this as an opportunity to articulate their interest by why they chose that particular bureau. I'm interested in human rights. I'm interested in environmental policy. So there is not really any one thing we're looking for. It's a very holistic approach to the evaluation process. What we're looking for is their ability to articulate what it is that they hope to get out of this program and why they're doing it.
So it sounds like even if they haven't had a chance to study abroad, if they can make those connections for you between the things they are interested in and global issues, that helps bring you on that journey between where they are and where they hope to be through this program. Is that fair?
We have many students that the first time they've gotten a passport is to participate in this program. We have students where they're the first ones in their family who've ever traveled abroad. We have students that it's the first time in Washington, it's the first time they've been out of their state. So it's a wide range of opportunities. Sometimes they do have to explain to their parents why they want to go overseas, because many of them are recent immigrants or first generations, and their parents kind of look at them like, we fought so hard to get here. Why are you so anxious to leave? But there isn't any really one particular experience that we're looking for.
And to build on that, one of our other questions here in the chat is about the security clearance process. Can you talk a little bit about that? Does it resemble other fellowship programs? Does it resemble a full-on state employment clearance process? Can you share a little more about that?
I wish I understood the process better myself. I oftentimes, we'll look at the list and we'll look at, where people come from and what their backgrounds are, and we'll scratch our heads and we'll go, oh, this one's going to be difficult, or this one's a breeze. We can't predict. We absolutely can't predict. I have seen people with very complicated backgrounds, families still living in X country overseas, not a question. A student who lived in Idaho his whole life and never went out of the state, took forever. I can't tell you what makes or breaks a security clearance. So I really encourage everybody to just apply. In doing the security paperwork, and we say this in the letter when we send it out to the students after they've gotten their provisional acceptance or offer to join the program. We talk a little bit about the security and what they're looking for, and the necessity of being complete and honest and forthright in the security information. There is probably very little at this stage of their lives that is totally like, oh, there's no way. But if the security investigators find out something from somebody else and don't find out about it from the applicant, that's the kind of thing that sinks an applicant. The investigators know this generation. They know that the possibility of finding a student who has never had a sip of alcohol or has never indulged in marijuana is probably, not going to happen. But they also understand when the question is asked, how often? When did you quit? The answer should not be 20 minutes before this interview. Yeah, I think they understand the group that they're working with. Sometimes it is time consuming because it is a secret security clearance. So it is a complete security clearance. And so for some of the students that still have family that live overseas that have to be part of that clearance process, or they have, undocumented parents that have to be part of that security process, it takes time. There is a deadline that we set after which we have to tell the student, I'm sorry, I didn't come in on time. And unfortunately, that does happen every year. That there's, and I can't tell you what it was because I don't have access to the information, where the students don't get cleared in time. So as a result, we have, this year, we had 45 students that we gave provisional letters to. And then with the hopes of having 35 that will participate this summer. I'd love to get the numbers up, but we had the leadership come down and say, we want to have 40 students. And we went back and we said, that's great. This is what it costs to do 40 students. And they said, no, you can't have that much money. I said, this is how much it costs for 40 students, which is why we have 35 this year.
And is there accommodation paid for in Washington? Is there travel paid for?
So we provide the housing in Washington and overseas. The embassies provide housing overseas. We provide cohort housing in the Washington, D.C. area. Transportation is paid within the within the United States. We've flown people from Puerto Rico and from Hawaii, both to Washington and to the assignment overseas. So it's an expensive program.
That links to one of our other questions in the chat, which is whether students who are outside the DC area have an advantage or have a disadvantage from the fact that they are outside the Beltway.
Doesn't have any impact whatsoever. We've had students who have applied from their study abroad overseas. We've had, students, we would love to get, there's certain states where we haven't had a lot of inroads, I'd love to get somebody from Mississippi. We haven't had anybody from Alaska. There's some geographic diversity that I'd like to get into the program. We all know that there's certain schools in certain areas where this is part of the ecosystem. And, the students already know, and they're already, on their list of what it is they plan to do for their academic career, internship at the State Department is on the list. But the ones that we really want to get to are the ones who haven't thought about it yet.
So is a federal resume required as part of the application process?
You need to fill out the resume that is on the USA Jobs site. It does not have to be done in the federal way of listing everything you've ever done completely, and realistically at this age, there's, I'm amazed at what the students have been able to do, but it doesn't need to be done in that depth. But we do ask that they use the resume builder on USA Jobs. That allows us to have a standardized format to look at, which I think is advantageous to the students.
And is building that something you would recommend students do now, even though the process doesn't open until August, or should they wait until they have the most information closest to the deadline?
I don't think there's anything wrong with opening up an application now, make it a summer project, to get their account set up on USA Jobs, start playing around with their resume. The system is not the most intuitive system in the world, and you may run into some glitches or you may need some help. Better to give yourself some time to do that. And not, it breaks my heart every year. There is, I get the slew of emails of, I tried to get it in and I was trying it, 11:58 before the deadline of the night and it didn't go through. So, I'm sorry. 1,600 other people figured out how to do it. So one of the reasons why I like talking with you all now is to put that idea out to the students that this might be a good project to work on over the summer. Set up your account on USA Jobs. Think about, what a statement of purpose might look like. Don't wait until the last week, because we advertise it. We usually advertise it for 10 days. If you're thinking about it before that time frame, you're going to put together a more competitive proposal project application.
And I want to stress that Marty's not kidding. It really is only open for 10 days. And so your students get that alert and then need to jump on it to make sure they are one of those and not the 11:59 and 36 seconds student. And that relates to another question we had, which is whether these opportunities might live in Handshake or any of those other systems that schools might use, or if there's another way to make sure that folks get the alert when it opens.
You can go to careers.state.gov and sign up for the Talent Network. And that will give you an alert whenever any of our State Department opportunities become available, whether it's the seasonal internship or whether it's a fellowship or whether it's a job. So I really encourage the students to take a look at careers.state.gov. That also has a lot of information about a lot of different opportunities at the Department of State, as well as information on the different bureaus that are available. So they can do a little research on, there's a little quiz you can take on which bureau is for me. But I really think the careers.state.gov site is very well done for anybody who is thinking about the Department of State. I think they do a very good job with that site.
And related to that, Marty, outside of USFSIP, we have a couple of questions wondering how students broadly can get prepared between their undergraduate degree and seeking a job with the State Department. If there are other opportunities that are maybe 1 year instead of 2, other resources, knowing your long career at state that you could speak to that advisors should just be aware of beyond USFSIP.
For those students who know that the State Department or being a Foreign Service officer is what they want to do, the fellowship programs are great. There's a Pickering, a Wrangell for Foreign Service officers. There's now one for the Diplomatic Service. There's now one for Information Management Specialists. Keep an eye on those. I think those are only going to expand as everybody decides that they love the program and they want to, they want to have, every bureau wants to have their own, every specialist wants to have their own opportunity. But many times that's a big commitment for somebody who's graduating at their undergraduate to know that that's what they want to do. And so I think they also need to know that that's okay. You don't have to go directly from your undergraduate to your graduate program to the Foreign Service. You can get out and get a job. That's the mother side of me. Any job is a good job. Go out and get a job. Build your skills, build your experience. There are Fulbright opportunities. If you're more like I was on that, how do I get overseas and get somebody else to pay for it? Foreign experiences, if you're looking, while you're still in school, the language scholarships from the Department of State, anything that, instead of trying to focus on what's the perfect next step job title, focus on the skills that you want to develop. Are you not a very good writer? And what you really need to do is you need to focus on writing well. Do you fear public speaking? And what you really need to do is get yourself out of the comfort zone in order to be a better public speaker. Are you shy about mixing and mingling? So you need to force yourself. I think the biggest piece of advice I give to anybody who's thinking about a diplomatic career or a career in foreign affairs, get yourself outside of your comfort zone, whatever that comfort zone may be, and stretch yourself, because the confidence that a student gets from going from the I couldn't possibly do that to I did that is totally empowering and gives them the confidence that they need to do anything. But it's particularly important when you're talking about foreign affairs, you're talking about working at the Department of State or one of the other foreign services. You will constantly be running into situations that you have no idea what you're doing. So getting yourself comfortable with trusting yourself and your judgment and your capacity and your capabilities, I think is extremely important. So the path, there are many different ways to the Department of State. There are many different ways to becoming a diplomat. There are many different paths. There's not one pathway. There's not one golden ticket. They need to find their pathway, and that's okay.
I love that. And one of the things we had talked about in our advisor training a few weeks ago, friends, if you may remember, is finding those global opportunities locally to help students be uncomfortable right in their own backyard.
And in the United States, that's so easy to do. You think you're interested in refugee affairs. You don't have to go overseas to work with refugees. You can do that in the United States. You're concerned about immigration and border security. Well, that's certainly an issue in the United States. You're concerned about global health. You can do that in the United States. Having an overseas experience is transformative. And anybody who can get that experience, I highly recommend trying to figure out the ways to have that experience. I used to be a diehard academic year abroad or nothing, but now I'm much more open to just get out there. I don't care if it's 2 weeks in the summer, something that gets you outside of the United States, because you never look at the United States the same way again when you look at it from the outside in. And you're a different person when you are the American in a group and you're the only American in a group, and suddenly you have to explain why we do the wacky things that we do. It just gives you a totally different perspective. And there are many different ways now to help students find the resources to study abroad. So I really encourage that. It's not, if you can't do it, you can't do it. And you can get that experience someplace else. But there's not anything that replaces the transformative experience of being overseas in some capacity.
Absolutely. And to our advisors, that whenever we learn about those opportunities, we promise to share those with you so that you can bring those to your students as well. Marty, the next question we have is about what you're looking for in the evaluation process. And you talked about some of the minimum things, obviously US citizens, GPA. What are those other qualifying factors that help the right candidates rise to the top for you?
Someone who demonstrates a knowledge of themselves, they know what they want, they can articulate what they want, they write reasonably well as they're articulating what it is that they want and why they want it. Somebody who understands that diplomacy is public service and they're interested in the concept of public service, and they can articulate why they're interested in public service. Most of the time, that's the kind of candidate that rises to the top. We look at transcripts, we look at grade points. Those are kind of the, all right, did they meet the minimum? What really gets it across is how they tell their story. And I think the ones who do that well are the ones who take a little bit of time to think about it. And so I really encourage students to take the time to craft a well thought out statement of purpose, a well thought out statement of financial need that tells their story. And it's oftentimes useful to have somebody else read it. Because sometimes when you write, you think you're telling one story and your reader doesn't quite get it. So sometimes I think it's always a good idea to have somebody else read it to see whether that story that you're trying to get across gets across. It's hard for some students, I know, to do that on paper. They'd be much better if we did interviews. I wish we could do interviews, but that's not feasible. We had recommendations at one point. We got rid of recommendations as well, because once again, it's a capacity issue of the staff to review them. But the other thing, after doing that for a few years of reading through them, they didn't give us a lot of added value, unless the student was really clueless and picked somebody who gave them a horrible evaluation. which told us something about the student. In general, they were very good about picking people who told them how fabulous they were. I mean, so, and it's also a capacity issue for the team that we have to make this selection. So it's the ability to tell a story, a comprehensive, holistic story, where we feel like we know something about this applicant. They come across as a individual person.
One of the follow-up questions that I often get to that is, particularly if a lot of the students have financial need, where do you find the line between the students telling you their successes, celebrating what they've done, their resilience or their ability to use the means that they have to accomplish things, and students just giving you a laundry list of problems or trying to um people may not want to share the difficulties that they've had or the things that they've overcome. What advice do you have for students finding that right balance between showcasing the resilience they've displayed and a laundry list of problems, or having it come across as looking for pity, or not, people don't want to own the problems that they've had, or they don't want you to choose them for the problems that they've had. Do you have advice for students navigating that balance?
That's a good question, because when you read through some of these applications, you can see that this is a thing. That a lot of schools, a lot of fellowships are looking for, and you can sometimes see the students struggling with how much do I have to say to get what I want, and how much do I want to share? And I'm very respectful. I'm very respectful of that. But I also have applicants who say I have no financial need. Well, those are the easy ones to get rid of. Yeah. This is a great program. I want to do this program. I have no financial need. Most of the students can come up with it without talk, if they don't want to talk about it directly, through their narrative, and it comes through. They talk about the jobs that they've had. They've talked about their family responsibilities. That kind of lets us know, they probably don't come from the wealthiest of families. If, they had to help out at mom's, grocery store or whatever it was. Things that the reason why I bring that up is that I don't want people to feel like they can't talk about their everyday lives. They can't, we want them to talk about who they are. And not everybody has that wide range of opportunities. Every one of your students, they're at pretty good schools. So they must be pretty good students. They must have done something to demonstrate already that they have this capacity. So it's a matter of talking about, sometimes the students get the message across by talking about their balance of their lives, of I have to do this, but I also have to do this. There's no reason to apologize for, I haven't had a study abroad opportunity, or, I go to a community college. We would absolutely love students from community colleges and highly recommend that they be urged to apply, because they're usually right at that great point of having done the first 2 years at a community college, ready to move over to finish out their degree. They come with a wealth of experience. One of the students that we have coming on board is ex-military. He's going to be 30 years old, and he's going to be participating in this program with a bunch of kids. Every year we have a couple of older non-traditional students that come on board, and their perspective is priceless on what they're able to add to the program. So there are different ways in telling their story that we get a feel for what their financial need is. And that's one of the reasons why I think the financial needs statement is so important, because that FAFSA number doesn't necessarily show that we've had this income in the past, but X happened, and we no longer have access to the same resources that we had before. Getting that into the financial statement helps, and we've had a wide range of students from every possible story that you can imagine, from very wealthy to no longer, some horrible things have happened and they've had to readjust. Many of those stories I didn't know about fully until the students were with us. Some of them have had to declare themselves to be completely independent because of issues that have happened in the family. All they've told us in the application was they had to declare themselves independent. That tells us something, right? If they're at that age and they need to, only consider their own personal expenses. There are ways of getting that out there so that we get the whole story about who the student is.
So two questions related to that. One, if someone is primarily merit-based and less need-based aid, are they still competitive? And then my second question is, there have been some hiccups with the FAFSA this year.
I
Do
heard.
you have some thoughts or some advice, or is any part of the process going to be adjusted to account for that unusual experience?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get better educated. I've been hearing a lot of rumblings about that. So I need to get better educated about what that FAFSA form is actually going to show me this year when we're looking through the application process. I think it will make the financial statement even more important. The financial part is kind of a baseline thing that we look at, and then we look at merit. There are only, like I said, 45 students. If we get, and we get into these tussles between the different committees of, but you have to take this one, you have to take this one, well, you have to take this one, you have to take this one. And sometimes that'll come down to, but this one really demonstrated more financial need. They're all, when we get to the upper levels of this, when we get down to the last 45, they're all brilliant students. They're all extremely good students. What we're looking for are that differential. So I think, but I do have to get educated on the FAFSA because I've been hearing a lot of rumbling.
So have I. So have I. And I very much appreciate how much care you all go into actually reading all the documents students prepare. Not every fellowship is that hands-on with the process. Other questions, colleagues? I see one more in the chat, but we have a few more minutes to pick Marty's brain on how best to celebrate your wonderful students in this way. And I did see your request. We do have a PDF overview of the program that we'll be able to share with you. So you'll have that as well as the website, as well as some other tools to get this out to your students. And you can flag that careers.state.gov email alert, and it will just magically appear in your inbox when the time comes. So Marty, the other question that we have is back to security clearances, everyone's favorite thing to worry about. If a student receives an offer and then goes abroad, can that complicate their clearance process? Or because they've already had the offer and been through it, they've checked that particular box?
We do a provisional offer. The students fill out their security paperwork. And then we wait for the security clearance as well as some other documentation. Before they get their final offer, they need to have a security clearance. They need to show that fall semester, they maintained the 3.2 and that they're a continuing student into the spring semester. Once we have all that, they get the final offer of, okay, yeah, we're ready to go. Many of the students study abroad. It might make it complicated, but DS has figured out how to talk to people virtually. So I mean, I haven't really seen any instances. Students do go to funkier places than they used to when I was a student. And if you went to Western Europe, you were lucky. They have a tendency to turn up in some wacky places. when you're under a security investigation, it's probably not the time to go to North Korea, though I don't think there's ever a time when I would encourage students to go to North Korea. Or, list the other countries that, we don't have diplomatic relations with or that are complicated. But in general, they've been able, that really hasn't been a stumbling block. I can't tell you what the stumbling blocks are. There doesn't seem to be a pattern after all these years of trying to figure this out. But I have seen students get security clearances while they've been overseas. So I don't think that's a particular stumbling block.
And they would need to do the same things, know where they had to live, not date a North Korean girlfriend, even if they are studying in France. Those basic things that generally we encourage students to do if they like a security clearance.
And if you have done some of those things, because we cannot all, we cannot pick who we fall in love with, that you are truthful in your application. Because what tweaks them is, why didn't they tell us? What else are they hiding? What else haven't they told us? So I tell the students, you don't have to answer more than the question that is being asked, but answer that question completely and honestly.
Absolutely. And Elizabeth makes a great point in the chat too. What we're talking about is the State Department. Of all the multitude of international agencies within the government, they're all going to have their own distinct process.
Yeah.
So the 18 different intelligence agencies are going to have 19 different ways of doing everything. The 4 major foreign services are going to have different ways of doing things. So this is where we hope to be of service to you all too, to share what we know about how those different processes live. But for this process, state obviously is well equipped to deal with folks who have been overseas, who are going overseas, who are living all of those different components in just a different way than the intelligence community or some of the other feds. And we're grateful for that because that gives these wonderful opportunities for students. Any other questions, friends, while we have Marty? Marty, you said the last week of August is when folks should look for the USFSIP opportunity to open. So this would be a great time even to talk to freshmen right now as they get ready to become sophomores and sophomores as they get ready to become juniors as well.
Yes, it's time. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really appreciate having the opportunity to talk with you all today. This is really the time to kind of get, because then we're going to get into finals and we're going to get into the summer and we're going to get into to just kind of plant those seeds, have them set up the account, suggest they set up the account at USA Jobs, suggest that they get onto the talent network from careers.state.gov, that they start thinking about and looking at. One of the hardest, and it's not just our program, it's any federal program. One of the hardest things sometimes to get the students to wrap their minds around is that lead time. When I have students come to me, like now and say, wow, how can I get an internship for the summer? It's like, we've already completed the application process for spring 2025. I mean, it's that lead time that I think sometimes it's hard for the students to comprehend. And that's where the advisors can be very helpful of kind of reminding them of, this is what you want to do. This is the time frame in order to do that. And that's even true, like with the graduate fellowships. There's this big rush of stuff that comes in the fall. I mean, everybody just seems to want, everything to happen in the fall, whether it's a Fulbright or whether it's a Pickering or whether it's everybody comes together in the fall for the next year. I mean, that's a whole year in advance. So a lot of it has to do with just getting them focused on the timing it takes to take advantage of these opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities, but they're not going to fall in your lap. You have to prepare, you have to be vigilant, you have to do some of the research in order to be ready to take advantage of the opportunities.
And thanks to everybody who's been dropping suggestions in the chat for ways that folks can think a little past the end of their nose, which I know is hard. And someone also mentioned the diplomats in residence. There
Yes.
are diplomats assigned to territories all over the US that are interested and want to come into your schools and your classrooms to talk to your students, to share these things. A lot of them are active on LinkedIn in a way that other agencies can't be, to share, hey, this is coming. I'm doing a webinar on this. I'm answering these kinds of questions. So those are also great folks for your office, even if you don't want to personally, to follow, so that you can stay one step ahead of this. There's lots of things that I know about and then forget and go, oh no, it's August. I have to celebrate this thing. So it's for busy folks, it's a great way to keep track of things. And I'm
And
seeing
you can
lots of
get the
great
list
things.
that you can get the list from careers.state.gov of where the diplomats are. The diplomats in residence are also now fully versed in doing lots of virtual stuff. They have totally pivoted to working in that virtual environment. And so feel free to reach out to do things virtually. And they're very, very active. In fact, I'm doing one of these for them later in April too.
And we're always thrilled, of course, because many of them graduated from APSIA schools. So it all comes full
It
circle,
all
friends.
comes around full circle.
Well, thank you, Marty, and thanks to all of our participants. This was a great session. And I've met some of these students and they are just incredible. And this is as transformative as Marty says it is for them and for all of us, for our country. So thanks to you for thinking about those great students. And we look forward to seeing their applications at the end of the summer. And Marty, you're always so wonderful to share this information. If folks had follow-up questions, is there a good place to point them other than the website?
People can always get in touch with me and feel free to share my state.gov email widely with the group. I'm always, if there are specific questions. I'm also on LinkedIn. I do a lot of mentoring and working with students and recent grads. Feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and to refer students to me. I am always ready to talk about careers at State.
And we're so grateful for it. Thanks, everyone. We look forward to seeing you at our next advisor webinar coming up. All of that information will be in my Friday email for you. And thank you again, Marty. Thanks to our participants. And Brittany, we can stop recording.
Thank you very much.